Hello, everyone. You might already know this, and it's no joke, but the US dollar is considered the most powerful currency on the planet right now. Its influence is so immense that 85% of all cross-border transactions involve it. On top of that, 63% of the world's foreign reserves are held in US dollars. Let's be honest. If we had the choice between holding our local currency or US dollars, many of us would probably choose the dollar. It's widely believed that its value is less likely to drop, which really speaks to its undeniable power. But have you ever stopped to wonder how it came to be? How did it evolve from just another currency to become the one that all others look up to? If you're curious, then stick around, because in this video, I'm going to walk you through its incredible journey. And who knows, maybe you'll be inspired to create a currency even more powerful someday. Let's get started. The story of the dollar's ancestor begins way back in 1690. At that time, a British colony on American soil issued the very first paper currency. However, it wasn't until almost 200 years later, in 1861, that the direct predecessor of the modern dollar was officially born. The U.S. Congress authorized the first federally issued paper money in denominations of $5, $10, and $20. These notes were famously green, but they weren't yet backed by gold. Instead, they were essentially promises that could be exchanged for coins. The idea was that the value of the paper money was guaranteed by the physical coins it represented. But in reality, the amount of paper money printed often didn't match the amount of actual coin reserves. As time went on, paper money became more and more common, gradually replacing coins for everyday transactions. Thanks to the growing economic and military strength of the United States, the dollar began to find its way outside of American borders. But this was still just a small part of its journey. Only a handful of American territories and a few other places accepted and used the currency officially. The real game changer came in 1913. When President Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act. This act created the Federal Reserve System, America's central bank. Now, initially, this didn't seem to have a huge impact on the dollar's global standing. It just changed how money was managed, placing the power to print and control money in the hands of an organization that was designed to be independent of the government. At the time, no one could have predicted how crucial this independence would be for the dollar's future strength. But for now, the dollar remained mostly a domestic currency, used within the U.S. and its territories. The moment the dollar truly began its ascent to global dominance was after World War II. The world was in ruins. Nations were devastated by years of brutal conflict, and their economies had plunged into an abyss. Countries were crying out for help and needed a new, stable, global system to rebuild. It was a classic case of demand meeting supply. In 1944, the United States, emerging from the war as a global superpower, stepped up. They organized a meeting with 44 allied nations, an event now known as the Bretton Woods Conference. Now, some sources say it was mostly a deal ironed out between the US and the UK, with the other countries just there to sign on the dotted line. Regardless of the backstage politics, the conference produced a stunning outcome. First, it was agreed that many of the world's currencies would be pegged to the US dollar at a fixed exchange rate. So, if the dollar went up, their currencies went up. If the dollar went down, so did theirs. This effectively made the dollar the anchor of the global financial system. The second, and perhaps most brilliant move was how the US instilled confidence in its currency. To convince the rest of the world to trust and use the dollar, the US made a simple promise. If you have dollars, you can bring them to us anytime, and we will exchange them for a fixed amount of gold. This was the gold standard. The message was clear. Don't worry, our dollar is as good as gold. It's not going to become worthless paper. With the US holding about 75% of the world's monetary gold at the time, everyone believed them. The dollar quickly became the world's primary reserve currency. However, this golden era couldn't last forever. By the 1970s, the American economy was struggling, partly due to the high costs of the Vietnam War and growing domestic spending. The US was printing more dollars than it had gold to back them up. Other countries started to get nervous. They saw the writing on the wall and began showing up to exchange their dollars for gold, just as the US had promised. The US gold reserves started to dwindle at an alarming rate. It reached a point where America could no longer honor its promise. So, in 1971, President Nixon made a shocking announcement to the world. The United States would no longer exchange dollars for gold. This event, known as the Nixon shock, effectively ended the Bretton Woods system. You would think that without the gold backing, the dollar would collapse and become worthless paper. But the US had another masterstroke up its sleeve. The dollar was about to be reborn, backed by something else entirely. US officials went to Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter at the time. Oil was, and still is, an essential commodity for every single country. They struck a deal. The US proposed that all oil sales from Saudi Arabia must be conducted in US dollars. In return, the United States military would provide protection and security to the kingdom. It was a mutually beneficial agreement and was quickly accepted. Soon after, other oil-exporting nations in OPEC followed suit. This system created what is known as the petrodollar. Suddenly, the dollar became indispensable for a new reason. If a country wanted to buy oil, it first had to buy US dollars. This created a constant, massive global demand for the currency, cementing its status as the world's premier reserve currency, long after it had been disconnected from gold. And that, in a nutshell, is how the dollar, through a series of strategic moves, crises, and pure economic might, rose to become the king of all currencies. It's a fascinating story of power, strategy, and influence. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next one.